It's really wonderful to see so many of you here, and I know everybody is so really busy, so to give up your afternoon I'm very, very grateful for, if not slightly scared. What I'm going to do before we kick off, just in case people don't know who they are, I'm sure you do, but I would just like members of my management team, what's called the wider leadership team, just to wave their arms in the air so everybody knows, if I talk about my management team, who we're talking about. So we've got Andrew, Tim, Tilly, Richard, Janine, and, oh, what's your name? Mick. So that is who we are. Hopefully you'll find this afternoon interesting. I think this morning when we obviously ran this the first time, it seemed to go very well. People found it interesting, and hopefully you will do today. That's why we're here. And hopefully when you leave today, we'll have at least addressed those issues for you. And as Kate said, there will be opportunities. We played it a bit by ear this morning around when those opportunities came to ask questions, but there will be plenty of time for that. What my real role today is to try and bring to life for you, I guess, why families and communities, who we are, why we're all together, and what it is that's important to us, and what we hope to achieve over the next 12 months or so. We spent some time as a management team and with other colleagues in Ports around trying to pull together what's quite grandly called a Families and Communities narrative, which is now on the front page of our intranet site with a real dubious picture of me, which they say the camera never lies, but I really hope it does, because that's quite shocking. That tries to capture why we're here and what we're about, but thinking about trying to bring this to life, I guess I started to think about why the things that are in that narrative are important to me, and why they'd be important to you as public servants. And we all joined, I think, public service for a reason, which was probably, perhaps by accident for some of us, but for most of us, for something in our history or our past that kind of got us there. So what I'm going to do is share with you, I guess, my story. It is an abridged version, there are things left out, but I hope at the end to bring that together with the narrative to kind of demonstrate why we're here. So hopefully you'll stay awake whilst I kind of recount my history. And you will all have far more interesting stories, but this is the reason why I joined public service, to make a difference, hopefully, to people's lives. And I'm going to start with my grandmother, who was born at the start of the 20th century, and she was one of, I think, 7 children who lived in a tenement in the northeast. Her mother got married late, and she had certainly the last of her children well into her 40s, which was quite unusual, I think, in those days, and sadly affected her well-being. I think today we'd say she had significant mental health problems. I think in those days they just thought she was mad. My grandma didn't have an education, and she had a fairly unhappy and underprivileged childhood, and she knew that she had to do something to escape that. So at the age of 14, she got on what I think would have been several trains, and she went from Newcastle down to Leeds Castle in Kent, which is now a big tourist attraction. If anybody's been there, I don't know. And she went into what's called service. And for those people who've ever watched Downton Abbey, I think what she was called was the undermaid. So she was the young girl out scrubbing the steps in the morning and clearing out the fires before the family got up. She wasn't allowed to be seen by the family. She couldn't read and she couldn't write. And that's how she started, I guess, what we call her career. But what she could do was cook. And she could cook sublimely and absolutely amazingly, way beyond her years, really, with a talent that I've no idea, and she had no idea where it came from. And that was recognised by the people that she worked with. And she was encouraged within that family of service, and to some extent by the family that she worked for, to take advantage of that. And to cut a very long story short, eventually staying with that family. She became their head cook, which was quite remarkable in those days. Probably like going from, I don't know, a part-time worker in a council to chief exec, really, in quite a short time. But she still couldn't read or write. And the reason she was able to do that job, in terms of being able to order the food every week that was needed, she knew what food was needed, but she couldn't write it down. And the other staff did that for her. So she could hold that job, that support wrapped around her to make the best for herself. She then met, as happens to many of us, a chap. A very witty, a very entertaining, a very handsome, and an extremely clever man who was an engineer and a friend of one of the footmen, who whisked her off her feet and brought her to Derby, which is where I'm from. And he was an engineer, and he worked at a newly founded company in Derby that had moved from Manchester called Rolls-Royce, and seemed to have a very, very bright future ahead of him. Nice home, he was from a very good background, a home that was furnished and full of books. She had 2 children, but what she didn't know when she met this very witty and charming man was that he was an alcoholic, and that she would get knocked from pillar to post for most of their married life. And that one day he would leave her with 2 small children under the age of 6, and that she would never see him again from the day he walked out the door, apart from once, when he came back with a horse and cart and he took every piece of furniture in the house, leaving 2 orange boxes and a table, which was all in those days, no CSE, no welfare state, no benefits, nobody to stand up for her. That was all he was obliged to do. And so there she is, a woman without a job, with rent to pay, 2 small children, still can't read and write. But what she absolutely knew, that for her 2 small children, 2 daughters, they were not going to have the life that she was now destined to have. So she worked from morning till night, cleaning and cooking wherever she could, to bring enough money in to feed the family and to put a roof over their head. And she only managed to do that through the support of her neighbours and the community that she was in, who rallied round, helped look after her 2 girls, also hand-me-down furniture, hand-me-down clothes. And what she did was remarkable, and she's probably the most remarkable person I've ever known, is she got 2 girls to grammar school, which in those days was quite an achievement with that background. One of them, who isn't my mum, who is the eldest, was an absolute academic flyer. And she became head girl at her grammar school. She got a scholarship to Oxford, and she went on to do, I think, a master's at Cambridge, became head of what was then personnel at London School of Economics, and became the first female editor of Motor magazine. So absolutely flew. The other daughter, who had some big footsteps to follow, was my mum, who was also extremely able, but liked to enjoy herself a bit more than probably her older sister, who was very studious, and also who got absolutely fed up throughout her school life of being told she wasn't quite as good as her elder sister, and she'd never do quite as well. So she kind of made, I think, a decision in her early teens that she'd have a good time instead. And like most of us, went to youth clubs, and that's where she met my father at 15. My dad was a bit of a rascal, a bit of a local celebrity. He played football for England schoolboys, and kind of sporting heroes at that time were always, I think, quite attractive. And they got it together in many ways. And the result of that was that just after her 16th birthday they got married, and a couple of months later my brother was born. Not the start that you probably want in life. Living with in-laws, still really 2 quite young children in a certain extent, starting off on life together. My dad was a brickie, didn't really have a trade, and eventually they got a council house, which I think is what happened to most people there, in the middle of Derby, in a very, very large council estate. Worked their socks off, and 10 years later, much to their surprise and I suspect horror initially, along came me. And I went to school on a council estate that by this time was getting a bit rough around the edges. And my junior school, as it was in old money, was one of those schools in the 70s, which is a bit laissez-faire, Teachers believed in letting you do what you wanted. There wasn't much discipline. So I just did English from morning till night and read books, because that's what I like. Never did maths, never did science. Until we had a new teacher who scared the pants off everybody because he was ex-army and he believed in discipline. And everybody was absolutely taken aback at this new teacher, especially when he was my form teacher. And he actually made us do things we didn't want to do, like maths and science, and sit down when we were supposed to, and stand up when we were supposed to. And I don't think at the time I realised the difference that he actually made to my career, my future. But at parents' evening, he did say something that really resonated with my father, and which I think has explained, I guess, my career to date. And what he said was, you have a child here who's capable of doing anything she wants, as long as she wants to do it, which is an issue, and she believes she can do it, and you support her. So my dad thought about this. He was from a very large family. Again, everybody had left school at the first opportunity. I went through then, obviously, my education with my father encouraging me, not necessarily to go to university, but to be the best that I could be at whatever I chose to do. He knew that I loved books. We didn't have much money when I was little, but every Friday he would appear coming home from work with a book. Tended to be, when I was younger, those Enid Blyton books, those little hardbacky things. One book a week until the day I left home to go to university at 18. But when I was younger, he could only afford one book. So every Saturday when he came home from work at lunchtime, we went to the library. And that's where I met other people that love reading, love books, felt warm, cosy, where I had the opportunity to read things that I wouldn't normally have. On a Sunday, we worked, but every Sunday afternoon we went out. Because as a sports person, he recognised the benefit, fresh air, taking advantage of the beautiful scenery in Derbyshire, which is obviously where I'm from, and made sure that we were getting out there and really kind of allowed to run riot, really. So I went to university. When I got to university, what was quite clear to me was that I was quite odd. I am odd, but it suddenly occurred to me I was quite odd, because most of the people that I started university with were from down south, who'd come up to look at those strange people in the north. I went to university in Liverpool, but also most of whom had been privately educated. All grammar school educated. There weren't any grammar schools where I was. And it started me to think about the people I'd gone to school with who were far cleverer than me. And the fact that many more of them should have been where I was, if they had wanted to. But actually, the community I lived in, the culture was you left school at 16. If you're a lad, you got an apprenticeship at Rolls-Royce or the railway, as it was called. If you're a girl, you went to secretarial college and you learned how to type, and then you'd get married. And that is actually what happened to 95% of the people that I went to school with. And that's fine if that's what they wanted to do. But I'm absolutely convinced, knowing some of those people, that they would have liked their eyes opened to the opportunities that there were for them. So I guess that's my story. Not very dramatic. What I would say is I had a father, I think, who was a very ordinary man in the eyes of the world, but actually I think was quite remarkable. And by the time he died at 49, sadly, the week before I took my finals, so he did never see me graduate from university, who had looked after his family. He set up his own company, employed 60 people, gave them good income, a good job, and a nice house, so that his family could have better than he had had. And I felt very privileged to have been supported to be able to do what I wanted to do. Having said that, when I got to university and those people that I met, there was one person I did meet who truly I thought was remarkable, and who had a very similar story, but was so much braver than I was. That lady's name is Natalie. She is now head of disability services at Liverpool City Council, and she had gone to Liverpool University with severe disabilities. She had a very badly deformed leg, and she had real issues with her sight. And very unusually for those days, she was out. She was a lesbian, and that was very brave then, I think, to tell people that and to be really front on. What was really remarkable about Natalie was she had come from a school not like me where a couple of people went to university each year. She was the first person ever from her school to go to university in Bromley. And the support that she got from her family and her teachers to do that was truly amazing. Because imagine being the first ever to fill in a UCAS form to go for a university interview to get through that process. She now runs, as well as her job, she runs a theatre group for young people with disabilities that tours the country, that gives them the courage to perform, the courage to deliver something that people want to see and will pay for, and has given them a huge amount of self-confidence. So that's my story. In terms of our narrative then, we're all in public service for a reason. My reason is to give all the people like me the opportunities to take advantage for themselves of creating their own future. So to improve the safety, the health, the enjoyment, the education for everybody that we possibly can. We may do it in a different way than we used to, but really being able to use the assets that we have within our directorate. We have libraries, we have country parks, we have the ability of trading standards to keep people safe, for people to build a quality of life for their family that they want and they deserve, and to really focus that effort on the vulnerable and how we work with their families and their communities to support them to make the difference that they want to see for their families, because we want the best for our families. And to be able to be in a position of not necessarily doing what I did or you did, but of having that choice and that knowledge of what the world can offer. So that's my narrative. Please read it on the internet and think about your story.